Today we'll look at generating images using generative AI, but we'll specifically do it through APIs. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into DALL-E 3, which is the one that I used finally. I'll do a code walkthrough, but in addition to that, I'll show you some of the cost comparisons between DALL-E and a few other options that I was considering. I looked at Imagen 3, I looked at Stable Diffusion 3.5, and I also looked at Getty Images generative AI offering. So these are all good options. Each one of them has their own pros and cons. Specifically for my use case, I decided to go with DALL-E 3, and I'll kind of walk you through how I went about that process. So now to set the context, we are actually building the Deep Textiles app, which is a place where you can get curated AI articles, a lot of interesting stuff that's happening in the AI world, all of that brought to your fingertips. Now, while we're able to source a lot of good articles and we're able to find the right articles to show and curate it, the challenge is that sometimes many of the articles don't have images that come along with it, especially things like research papers. But to make it a little bit more attractive in the app, we thought, why don't we just quickly generate a nice image that is representative of the article. So for this, we have to give the article title, maybe a little bit of a description of the article, and that should be enough to allow us to generate an image. I think it's a very good starting point, especially if you have not done any kind of coding with generative AI before or with generative AI APIs. This actually is a very nice simple use case for us to do. So let's get started. So let's take a look at some of the different image generators. I'll go through a few of these and I'll share with you my reasoning for why I chose one over the other. Okay, start with DALL-E 3. I'm basically giving the same prompt to most of these image generators to show you kind of an apples to apples comparison of how it works. Now, DALL-E 3 from OpenAI, some of the reviews out there were very positive for this. It's generally a very intuitive, I think, image generator. The prompt that you give, it's able to make good sense of it, and it's kind of a interesting image out of that. Secondly, it also has inbuilt guardrails. These prevent any kind of controversial or problematic images from being generated, which is actually a good thing for me because I then don't have to do additional checks to make sure that the images are safe to put out onto our. I'm sure many of the others also like Gemini and Imagen have this, but for now I thought okay, DALL-E 3 is kind of taking care of that, so I don't have to worry. I tried using it in ChatGPT. You can generate up to 2 images for free every day, and overall it kind of gets it right on the first try. So I thought, okay, let me look at this. The only first downside is that you do have to have a paid version if you want to start generating images using this. Secondly, this is Imagen 3 Gemini. Now, this is not yet available to everybody. I mean, you have to get onto an allow list, which means you have to request access first. But Imagen 3 overall, I felt it was also quite good. It does tend to be a little bit cheaper than the others, so that's positive. Third, I took a look at Meta AI. This is, of course, open source, and Meta AI's Llama 3.2 actually is known for its fast image generation capability, right? And you can even edit it in real time just using it. But that is not something that I needed right now. So it was, it's a nice feature to have, but not of great use to me. I was able to test it out using Meta AI in WhatsApp as well as this particular site. And I thought, again, the images were quite good here. But to be frank, I think using it on Hugging Face or maybe from Vertex AI from Google, where it is also available, that is a little bit more cumbersome. I also looked at Getty Images. Now, they provide you indemnification, so which means that you will not get sued for any kind of copyright violations that come from it because they have already handled all of this. So that is a real plus point. However, I think for us that is overkill. I don't actually need that kind of support. Their images and all that are quite good, given that their entire model was trained on stock images. You do tend to get stock image kind of output from this. So again, it was not very interesting. And to be frank, this was a little bit expensive. Of all the different options that I reviewed, this was the most expensive. So I thought maybe I'm not going to go with Getty Images for this. And finally, Stability AI. Now, actually, these guys do have a really, really good image generator. They're one of the first people to come out with image generators. The Stable Diffusion 3.5 is what I was looking at. It has a lot of positive reviews. It also provides a lot of control through the API itself. They do pay a lot of attention to typography. Typography is nothing but text that is added into the images. So if you see this image, this we're leaving for the future is something that they've asked for it to add, and it has done a good job. So Stability 3.5 is really interesting. I think even in terms of cost, it is very competitively priced. The only challenge is that again, I didn't want to. I mean, I couldn't actually try it out because even if I had to use Stable Assistant, I had to take a subscription just to get access to the free trial also. And I did look at some implementations on Hugging Face, but those were really slow, so I didn't get a good sense of what exactly I can do with this. But I think my biggest challenge with this is the company Stability AI right now has a lot of kind of management problems. If they shut down tomorrow, then again I have to come back, change a lot of the things I built into my app. Maybe that's a headache that I didn't want to take. Right. So overall, I decided that let me just look at DALL-E itself. But the cost, of course, there is an implication, and we'll take a look at that. Here's a cost comparison table for each of these. Of course, these are going to be kind of approximate itself, but at least it should give you a sense of where each of these stand. There was no pricing given specifically for Llama 3.2. I think it's basically if you're going to host it, what is your cost of hosting and generating this. Of all of these, Getty Images tends to be the most expensive. 10 to 15 cents per image is the expectation. DALL-E 3 is also kind of expensive. It approximately comes up to around 8 cents an image. That way, Google is quite good. Stability AI is really good. It's hardly 2 cents an image. For me, I actually felt that maybe OpenAI cost is fine because at 8 cents an image, I might use it like, a few times a day to generate, a couple of images. So that cost is okay for now. If our volume increases and it starts to become more expensive, then I look at maybe moving to Imagen 3, maybe even Stable Diffusion. I have selected DALL-E 3, so I'm going to go to OpenAI and create my account and start using. So you come to platform.openai.com to get started. This is the starting page. You can come down to the capabilities part and see all of the different things that they have. Image generation will give you an overview of how you go about it, what is the code like, fairly simple, and yes, some tips on how you can do all of this. To start using this, there's no way to do it as a free version. You'll have to go and do a sign up first, right? Create your account, add some credit, and then you can start. So you can click sign up to go ahead and create an account. And now that we have set up our account, we can go ahead and start using this. So before you do that, we need to go to settings and go to billing. And here you can go ahead and add your payment methods. I've added a little bit of extra credit here. I think minimum is $5 to be able to get started. If you want to add information about the company, GST code, all of that, you can go to preferences. Now, after you've done this, you're actually ready to use it. You can go to API keys, and this will give you your particular key if you need to generate. You can go here and create a key. Yeah, and you just copy this key. Be careful with your keys. Obviously, don't make it available in the public. If anybody else gets your keys, you will actually end up having to pay the money for that. And also, once you've created a key, you can't see it again, right? So at the time that you create the key, that is the time that you have to create. The good part is you can actually go ahead and generate the keys as many times as you want. There's no real challenge to generating a key multiple times. There's no cost. Once you have done that, you can go here to get access to the API's reference, and we'll take a quick look at it. Right now, under images, you do have different options. If you want to edit an image programmatically, you want to create variations, you can do all of those things. For now, I'm just focusing on the create image API. These are the different parameters to make the function call. The model is the first one. You can specify DALL-E 3 or DALL-E 2. Default will be DALL-E 2. N is actually the number of images to generate. So you can, at least with DALL-E 2, you can ask to generate multiple images between 1 and 10. DALL-E 3 only allows 1. For my particular use case, 1 is actually all I needed, so that's totally fine. DALL-E 3 also allows you to specify the quality. Your options here are standard and free. Right? So the default is standard. Response format, you can get it as a JSON or you can get it as a URL. Default again is URL. This is how it sends it back. I'll show you what that looks like when we actually run the code. And sizes. Now, size when it comes to DALL-E 2, it pretty much generates only square images, right? So 256 by 256 or 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024, which is the default. Now, when it comes to DALL-E 3, you can actually generate square image, or you can generate a horizontal image of 1792 by 1024, or you can generate a vertical image of 1024 by 1790. So this is actually an improvement that we have in DALL-E. Style, again, this is, I think, something very specific to DALL-E 3. You can ask for vivid actually. Vivid actually creates a hyper-realistic images. And user, now this is for cases where you allow users, your users to create images and you want to check, the usage, you might want to set rate limits. And finally, what this API returns is a list of image objects. Now let's get started with the code walkthrough. So this is a very simple program to generate an image, taking the title and a snippet from the article as the input. This is the usual setup from OpenAI. Import OpenAI. Here's how you set up your key, a secret key. You would in the .env file you would put that secret key and you access it through this, and you create an instance client equals OpenAI, and you can actually start to use using the client. So we're going to define this generate article image function. What it does is it takes the image prompt, it takes the width and the height. Defaults, like I said, are we are trying to create horizontal images. So it is 1792 by 1024. If you don't have a prompt, then just return that a prompt is required. Otherwise, you can. It's as simple as this. It's one line function, right? So what we have done here is client.images.generate. You can basically find this in the OpenAI API documentation itself. So the model I'm using DALL-E 3. I'm giving the prompt that we had created, and n equals 1. That's actually a default anyway. Quality, I'm just going with standard because I don't really need an HD quality image. And finally, the size, the width and the height. Putting that in, sending it out, I get the image URL. It's basically, it's a list of objects. So from the first object, I'm accessing the URL and return the image. This is basically how it gets used. So I've taken this article from TechCrunch. This is about an AI song generator which can provide completely legal and licensed music. And the first line from that article is basically this. It talks about two companies that are coming together to create the song generator and planning to share revenue with rights holders. I'm anyway setting these. I create this image prompt. Basically, I'm just joining these two, article title and the snippet. And then I'll print it just to show you guys what the prompt looks like. And then I'm going to call my generate article image function with all of these parameters. And finally, we will print out the image URL. So it's quite simple. So let's go ahead and run this. So you'll notice that this actually takes a little bit of time for it to generate. But if you can see, prompt is basically this, combines the title and the snippet from the article. So yeah, that's how much time it took. What we can do now is we can see from DALL-E, and this is the kind of image that generates. Pretty good, right? It's actually pretty good. So let's see if we can actually improve upon this. Yeah? The other way to do this, what I actually wanted to do, this prompt is actually very simplistic, right? It's just a title, maybe a little bit of a description. In my particular instance, the article snippet is an optional parameter, so I don't really need to send it. Even if I just send the article title, it'll change. Now, DALL-E 3 actually is a much smarter image generator. So the way it has been designed is once you get the prompt, internally it rewrites the prompt to make it a little bit more intuitive, and then that is given to DALL-E. If you want to use your prompt as is, in the prompt you actually have to specify it, and you'll find this in the API documentation. You can actually specify it saying that use this as is, I want to test this out. Right? So something like that. with this kind of a prompt, it has generated a pretty decent image. Let's see what I can do if I add a little bit more intelligence to this. So I've defined a different, so it's more or less the same code, but I've created another function here, which basically generates a prompt for image generation, right? So let's go back up. It's, as you can see, it is more or less the same thing. We set our OpenAI key. We have the generate article image function that we just saw right now. And here's my new function. So what I'm going to do here is I will pass the article title and article snippet, and I'm going to use GPT-4 here, right? So I'm telling GPT-4, I'm giving it this prompt to the API, saying, given the following article title and snippet, if available, create a detailed and creative prompt suitable for DALL-E 3 to generate an image that represents the article's content. So I've also given a little bit more instructions to GPT-4. I said that make the prompt detailed. About 30 words of the prompt should be specific, to the scene, the characters, the objects, all of those things. And another 30 words is a little bit meta. It's about the overall style of the image. It should be hyper realistic, vivid, photographic. Yeah, and I've also mentioned that the target audience for this image is AI developers. And then I call this the chat completion. It's GPT-4. I have specified max tokens, and then I send the prompt as the message. And I get that back. I've just added one additional thing here saying do not use any words or typography in this prompt. And the reason why I do this is because sometimes typography is not very great. There are some spelling mistakes. So the font looks a little weird, which I didn't want. So I've asked it not to use any words or typography in the prompt. If you recall, Stability AI actually does a really good job of this with Stable Diffusion 2.5. And then I've also put in one last thing saying if any part of the prompt goes against any of your policies or conflicts, just ignore that prompt and continue to generate an image as best as you can. Right? Because they do have, DALL-E 3 has pretty strong guardrails. So I just want any image to get generated that is representative of the article. I don't want it to fail just because there might have been something a little controversial in the article and DALL-E 3 decides that it cannot generate an image for this. Okay, so let's see how this thing is used. Again, it's the same article that I'm using. Article title is the same, and the article snippet is also the same. Image dimensions are the same. And now, basically, I'm going to use those two to call this generator prompt. And this image prompt that I get, I'm going to then pass it to my generate article image function. Let's try this out and see what we get as a. So now you'll see it is running the prompt generator with GPT-4. This itself takes a little bit of time. But now look at the quality of the prompt that has come out here, right? It's a lot more detailed. It talks about, it very vividly describes the scene. It's scene depicting representatives from these two different companies shaking hands over a holographic display. It talks about the background. It talks about, the creation of licensed music. Now, directly may not be able to do justice to all of this, but this actually is a much nicer prompt, right? Oh, and it's already generated the image for us. So let's take a look at it. Let's see what. So it's actually pretty good. It actually talks about how these two different companies are coming together, and it is about music. It's done a good job of listening to the actual prompt, right? So the prompt gave a lot of insights about all of these things. By just using a much nicer prompt, you can get a much more vivid image. Not that this image is bad. This is also a very nice image, but you see, you don't particularly like this kind of font. This is similar style, but it's a more vivid imagination, a little bit more creative. Of course, note that there would be an additional cost to using GPT-4 through the API. Right? So, is it worth the cost? That is something that you'll have to see. For those of you who are anyway very new to this, if you're not sure about what is all this, how do I do any of these things, the easiest thing to do again is to just ask Generative AI to do this for you. I'm actually using Cursor. So I asked Cursor here itself, can you generate code for me to use DALL-E 3? And I told it specifically what I want. I'm going to give it Title of an article, I'm going to give it. Description of an article, can you write the code to generate an image using DALL-E 3? And it did a pretty good job. Right? You can, if you're not using Cursor, you can of course use any other IDE that you want. You can try this out and go to either ChatGPT and ask it to generate the code, or you can ask Gemini to generate the code. Or I actually found that Anthropic's Claude does the best job. Just a quick note here. I mean, I'm sure this is just an issue at this point in time. DALL-E's function call syntax has actually changed. I think it used to be client.image.create, and now it is client.images.generate. The funny part was when I used OpenAI itself to generate that code, it generated it with the old API. And for some time, I was struggling and trying to figure out why is this not working. It should be fairly straightforward. When I looked at the API reference, it actually showed that hey, this is the new code that should be used. And simultaneously, I also gave that same error message to two or three different GenAI models, and Claude was the one that actually diagnosed it and gave me the correct solution very quickly. So just something for you to also be aware of. Sometimes when these errors occur, it's a good idea to just go and check with code generators or with ChatGPT and all of these things. They can actually diagnose it well for you. So if you're a beginner, don't get overwhelmed by all of these things. Just get started off with writing some code or by asking the code generator to write the code for you. It's a good way to get started, and it feels nice when you actually start to generate these images and text and get the solution. If you found this video useful, please consider subscribing to our channel. In addition to kind of introductory videos like this, we will continue to post a lot more code walkthroughs. We'll have interviews with experts. I will also be sharing career advice on how you can navigate this entire AI space. And we do meetups every now and then. These are deep dives on technical subjects, and we will share recordings from those also. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
If you're serious about a career in AI, follow Deep Tech Stars on your favorite social media platforms.